This summer, during the biggest sporting event of the year, Peacock turns to two broadcasting legends for the Olympics coverage you can't find anywhere else.
I think they mean us.
With an incredible duo sure to take home the comedy gold. Olympic Highlights with Kevin Hart and Kenan Thompson. New episodes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Only on Peacock.
This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
Well, if you look at what's happening in the world, there is a lot of stuff going on. We have a new presumptive Democratic presidential nominee. We have a lot of speculation about who she will pick as her vice presidential running mate. We have the continued fallout from an attempted presidential assassination. We have the resignation of the director of the Secret Service one day after she insisted she wasn't going to resign. But what we're going to discuss for the next hour is almost none of those things, because why? We're going to try and have a lighter look at the world at large because of something that happened in Michigan yesterday. Amidst all sorts of national tension, we've seen yet another instance of political violence in a small Michigan town. In our listening area on AM 910, the Superstation, a man placing Trump signs was attacked in Michigan. I can't think the fact that there's been yet another instance of political violence, I think, is a perfect example of why we need to focus on what unites us, what brings us together, humor, happiness, things that appeal to folks, better angels, not sowing divisiveness. And the go-to expert on humor, happiness, and more is my very good friend, Jeffrey Gurian, comedy writer, stand-up comic, host, author, producer, director, and dentist. Dr. Jeffrey Gurian, hello, my friend.
Hiya, Frank. So great to be on with you. You're the epitome of positive energy.
Thank you.
Really.
I try. Some days it's tougher than others.
No, it works. It definitely works. We all try.
It
doesn't come easily. You have to make an effort.
So let me begin with what I just alluded to, this instance of political violence in Michigan. And look, I guess there's always been violence throughout the history of humanity, and there's always been political violence throughout the history of politics. But it does seem like things are getting worse. Maybe that's just my perception, but I think things are getting worse. In your view, what can we do as a society, as a culture, as a country to turn the temperature down a little bit?
You know, it's such a great question, Frank. Comedy happens to be a healing force. And you can see that when you get a very mixed group of people in the audience, a multicultural group of people who are all laughing at the same things. And it breaks down all barriers. But by the time somebody is ready to commit violence, I don't think they're sane anymore. Humor doesn't work with people like that. They're not joking. You have to be pretty insane to commit a violent act. You know, I feel bad if I accidentally step on someone's foot. You know, I'm like, oh my God, are you hurt? Are you okay? You know, to actually go out and hurt another human being, unless you're in war, and these people are not at war, they're creating a war in their own minds. There's just a lot of insanity, and it's been building up for years. We're living in very crazy times, and a lot of people are over the edge, and those are the people who commit violent crimes, especially political crimes.
There was one, I think even a politician, I think he was a state senator the other day, who said that something like there would be a civil war in this country if his side doesn't win. And all I could think of when I saw that is, what good does that kind of rhetoric do anybody?
Nobody. Absolutely nobody. We had a civil war around 1865, I think it was. And, you know, years ago, I used to think about that. Even as a child, I was always upset by the fact that people didn't all get along. I didn't understand it. It was overwhelming to me. I didn't know at the time that I'm an empath, so I'm very sensitive, and I feel things more than I want to. You know, there was a time in my life, if I was with you and you were sad, I was sadder for you than you were. I overfelt my feelings. And so I always had that feeling. The world could be an amazing place if people just got along with each other. It seems so simple. But there are some people who they have very deep character defects. There's something wrong with them. And today, the world is so divided. People actually hate each other that are on the other side. They literally hate each other. And the rhetoric is so terrible that if you're not a sane person to begin with, it can spur you to do something terrible.
Yeah, it's and I don't necessarily know what the solution is other than to keep that in mind, that we should all be nice to one another and to try to not let the media inflame tensions and try to bring tensions down a bit. But well,
have you ever tried to talk to an insane person? You can't get through to them. If we tell them
I
that
have
it's
4 hours of doing it on a nightly basis.
Right. If you tell it,
sorry,
if you tell me that it's 2 a.m. and a guy's trying to convince me that it's really 2 p.m, you can't get through to a person like that. There's no way. They're already too far gone. And so humor can't help somebody like that. You know, it's even strange when you're in a comedy club and someone starts to heckle you. And you think, what country are you from where that's considered good behavior, where you're supposed to yell out at someone on stage? Where does that thought even come from?
You know, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I was listening to an interview that Jerry Seinfeld had done with Bill Maher. Bill Maher was interviewing Jerry Seinfeld for his podcast. And Jerry makes the point about how he used to say to hecklers, oh, you know, why don't we bring a microphone out into the audience so that you can, perform back? I
actually did something like that once. I don't often get heckled. It's very rare. But one time I did, and it bothered me. And I stopped the show. I said, ladies and gentlemen, there's a famous heckler in the crowd. He travels the country ruining shows. Sir, stand up and introduce yourself.
But what Jerry said is one of the things that we see now with Twitter and broader social media is that they actually have given the hecklers a microphone. Basically, now these people that never would have been heard from now can have that crankiness amplified and heard by thousands, maybe millions.
It's very big on social media. A lot of comedians who do crowd work specifically post things how they battled with a heckler, and they get millions of views.
I'm sure.
But it's like the Gladiators, it's a very low level form of comedy. Years ago, crowd work was not popular. These days, it seems to be very popular. Years ago, you did crowd work if you ran out of jokes. Right. There's a famous guy, Jimmy Brogan, who opens for Jay Leno, and Richie Tinkin, who owned the comic strip, told me that story, that he used to say, "Where are you from, sir?" When he was a new comic, he wanted to do crowd work. He'd go, "Where are you from, sir?" And no one would answer because it was a very small crowd. And one night, the regular comedian didn't show up and they had nobody to put on except Jimmy Brogan. It was a big crowd. He said, "Where are you from, sir?" Someone finally answered him, and he did very funny stuff. And from that time on, they put him on a regular show. So he proved that crowd work could work. Okay. But years ago, it wasn't respected. These days, people have their own shows based on crowd work.
Speaking of shows, since last I saw you, you have been to the Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Yes.
You were the keynote speaker at the Minneapolis Convention Center for the Academy of General Dentistry's 2024 convention. Big shout out to our listeners in the Minnesota area listening on WCCO. First of all, how did the event go, and how did you like Minnesota more broadly?
The event surpassed my expectations in every way. It was so good. It was better than I could even imagine. I got such a great response. First, it was a very big honor to be suggested by the president of the Academy of General Dentistry, Dr. Merlin Omer, had heard about me on a show. He saw me on a show, and he decided to invite me to be their keynote speaker. And the Minneapolis Convention Center, it's kind of like the Javits Center. The people in Minneapolis are so friendly, Frank. They actually say hello to you on the street, just like in New York. Amazing. Yeah. In New York, if somebody says hello, you better be ready to call the police.
Hold your wallet.
Yeah, right. Something's going on, right? And they have this thing there where you press a button and they let you cross the street. All the cars stop. I was afraid. I thought it was a trick. I don't want to. In New York, they aim for you if you try to do that, And in Minneapolis, They're so polite. Not only do they wait till you get across the street, they wait till you get home before they continue going on their way.
Yeah, that bodes well. I like that a lot. So you spoke about surviving a career in dentistry, utilizing positive thinking and humor, which is a great combination of your two professions, comedy and dentistry. Give us a little preview of something that you offered to the Minnesota dentists that maybe anybody, even if they're not a dentist, can take home.
Yeah, I talked a lot about thought. What the people said afterwards is that I touched a lot of people's hearts because I spoke about episodes in life that that seem like there's something bad, that turn out to be something good afterwards. And I gave many examples. One of them was I once got a flat tire that saved my life.
Ooh.
And it's a crazy thing. I was looking forward to going away for a weekend with someone I really wanted to spend time with. And when they brought my car around in the garage, it was making a weird noise. And I said to the guy, "What is that from?" He said, "It sounds like you got something in your tire, like you're going to get a flat tire," but it wasn't flat yet. And I thought to myself, what a negative way to start a weekend. I didn't want to tell this girl that I had a flat tire.
Right, sure.
It seemed like a bad vibe. So I thought to myself, in my insanity, maybe I should try driving out to the island and hope I don't get the flat tire, which is a silly thing to do. So I called the AAA and they said, "We can only help you if you're totally disabled." I'm like, "I'm driving." They said, "Well, we can't help you, but we're going to give you the name of a garage to go to." So I pick her up and I tell her, "I think I have a flat tire. We got to go to this garage." I go to the garage and I pull in and I see the man and I get, I think I'm a mind reader. I think I know what you think of me by looking at you, right? Which is totally wrong. So I think this man is not going to help me. He looks unfriendly. Sure enough, he says to me, "I'm sorry, I'm too busy. I can't take care of you." But then he shows me what a fool I am by saying, "I have a friend who has a garage nearby and I'm going to call him and I'm going to ask him to see you." I go there. The only way I could describe it was a garage from heaven. They're waiting for me in the street. They usher me in. They put my car on a lift. And a few minutes later, a guy comes over and he says to me, "I want you to see this." And he takes this hunk of metal. It's a round piece of metal with a screw through it. Takes it out of my tire. And he says to me, "This is what the cause of your problem was. I'll have the tire fixed. In no time, you'll be back on the road." I say, "Great, thanks." A few minutes later, he calls me back and he looks all shook up. And he says, "I got to show you this. You won't believe it." He said, "I know you don't know what this is, but if you see this rod controls your steering, and it was about to slip out. If that rod slipped out, you would have lost control of your car. You would have probably been killed."
Wow.
He said, "You're so lucky that you got a flat tire, and that's what brought you in here."
Wow.
And here I was cursing my luck that, look, everybody else gets to go away. When I want to go away, I get a flat tire, and the flat tire saves my life. So it shows that we're not the best judge of the events that happen in our lives.
So true.
And sometimes it could turn out to be something bad. And even in my personal life, I talked about my divorce. And I said, my ex-wife was a wonderful woman who remarried, adopted 2 children of her own, and had another child with her new husband. And those 2 children needed to be adopted, and that other child needed to be born. And that couldn't have happened had I stayed. So in retrospect, very often you can see the events in your life, even the ones that you think are painful, that could turn out to be something good in the future.
What a great attitude and what a refreshing perspective. And it's one that I try to live by, maybe not as successfully as you do on a regular basis, but, just to keep in mind how lucky you really are, because things really could always be worse. Last year, my wife and I, we go on vacation to Cape May, New Jersey for a week every summer, and we're going to be away next week. Last year, we're away, and we were visiting the Harriet Tubman Museum, and she gets into an incident where she dings the car, and she says to me, because we're talking about going back to the Harriet Tubman Museum next week because we didn't get to go there last year. She said, "Now I don't want to go. That incident started a year-long problem of bad luck with cars," and she lists all these things, and she said, "You'd agree, right?" I said, "No, because yesterday," and this was the day after this happened, yesterday there was a car that was 2 feet behind me that flipped over, and but for me being a foot in either direction, it could have
hit you, sure.
hit us and been a real disaster,
a
potentially even died. And
sure.
She agreed that's true, that maybe our luck wasn't so bad.
Well,
so.
It's all about perspective, and that's one of the things that I say in my happiness book, that you can't change your past. The only thing you could change is your perspective of your past. It's how you process the information. All our thoughts are based not on your experience, they're based on your interpretation of your experience. So it's why you could have two siblings that are completely different people. And if you ask them about their childhood, you'd think they had different parents because their interpretation of their lives are so different. And so it's all about thought, Frank, and that fascinates me.
What a great perspective. If people are just tuning in, my guest is Dr. Jeffrey Gurian. If you want to check out the Happiness book or any of his other books, Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, Fight the Fear, or anything else, you can go to ComedyMattersTV.com. That's ComedyMattersTV.com. Or you can just go to Amazon and search Gurian, Gurian. We're going to continue with Dr. Jeffrey Gurian in a moment. Our phone number, if you want to weigh in, is 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is Jump Around, and if you hear this song, there's a good chance that you will see Dr. Jeffrey Gurian in close proximity to wherever that song is playing. Jeffrey Gurian is my guest. He is a comedian, a producer, an author. He has done it all. A producer, director, former dentist, well, current dentist, really. Jeffrey Gurian, it is great to have you. And how did you make that transition for people that haven't heard you before, again, from dentistry to the world of comedy?
Crazy enough, I was doing both at the same time. When I was 12 years old, I decided what I wanted to be in this world, which is insane even to me. What 12-year-old kid knows what they want to do? But as I said, I was a very sensitive kid. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, and I knew I couldn't handle life and death situations. And I was wearing braces, and I said, you know what? I'll be a dentist. I'll be an orthodontist is what I thought originally, and I'll make people look beautiful. And I was already writing comedy. And my whole life has been that split. So while I was in practice, I was writing for Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers and even Milton Berle, who was my sponsor in the Friars Club, and Richard Belzer and Gilbert Gottfried. And I was the main writer for the Friars Roast for 12 years. And my nurse had strict instructions, never interrupt me when I'm with a patient unless it's for show business. So she'd come in and she'd say, Dr. Berle is on the phone, Dr. Lewis is calling, Richard Lewis would call, or Jerry Lewis. And the only one no one believed was Dr. Dangerfield. No one ever thought there could be a Dr. Dangerfield. And I told that story in Minneapolis because Joan called me one day from Las Vegas. I thought she knew about my day job when she hired me, and because her assistant called me and said, Joan wants to talk to you about writing for her, and she wants you to come to her home. And she had this palatial home on Fifth Avenue. And when I got to there, well, I thought she was inviting me to her home because she knew I was a doctor. So she was giving me that Sure. prestige, that honor, because most people were not inviting comedy writers to their home. I thought she'd meet me at the Friars Club. So I get to her house. The doorman says to me, you'll have to wait a few minutes. Joan just sprained her ankle and she's in a lot of pain. And I thought to myself, what a break. I can write her a prescription for painkillers. What comedy writer can do that, right? I said, and then she'll love me and she'll hire. Anyway, I get to her house. She doesn't know about my day job. She introduced me to some people that were there as Mr. Gurian. We got along great. She wound up hiring me. A few months later, she calls me at the office. My nurse comes in and says, Dr. Rivers is on the phone from Las Vegas. So I go in and she says, what do you do during the day? And I'm like, I work. She goes, well, obviously you work. What is it that you do? And I knew she knew. So I said, is this concerning the vicious rumor going around that I'm a dentist? I said, Joan, I've heard of accusing people of a lot of things, but that's really low. And she said, why didn't you tell me? And I said, because no one hires you in show business because you're a dentist. They hire you in spite of it.
Exactly.
Right? And we got along so great. She was such a wonderful person.
Jeffrey Gurian is here. If you want to chat with us, you can do so, 646-720-0635. Let me ask you to do a little comedy critiquing, okay? This is a little bit of audio, maybe you heard it, of the Republican nominee for vice president, J.D. Vance. And he makes a joke which I don't think went over that well. And I want you to evaluate it. And maybe if you were his comedy mentor, tell me what tips you would give him. Throw on your headphones if you can, just so you can hear. This is J.D. Vance a day or two ago.
I only wear headphones for you, Frank.
Thank you.
It is the weirdest thing to me. Democrats say that it is racist to believe. Well, they say it's racist to do anything.
Oh, you got to turn the volume.
I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday and one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too, but
I didn't hear the joke.
It's good.
I'll play it one more time for the sake of headphone volume.
It is the weirdest thing to me. Democrats say that it is racist to believe. Well, they say it's racist to do anything. I had a Diet Mountain Dew yesterday and one today. I'm sure they're going to call that racist too, but it's good. I love you guys.
Well, look, I understand where he's going with it because there are people right now sitting home waiting to be offended by something. Mm-hmm. People cannot wait to be offended these days. I didn't get the connection between Mountain Dew and being racist.
Neither do I.
Don't know.
Neither do I.
When a person is racist, they're referring to black people. So is it the joke that black people like Mountain Dew? I don't know that.
Yeah, I never heard that stereotype.
All I know is that politicians should basically stay away from jokes because they're not really funny people. And they feel the need to tell jokes because jokes is what brings people together, you know. I didn't really get that was a joke.
So that's you wouldn't hire him to open.
Polite. I think he needs a mentor. I'd work with him. I'd help him get funnier, you know. Who did I write for? I wrote for Ernie Anastas once, my dear friend, who wound up doing a speech at the White House. And I wrote a speech for him. And, you know, you can make people... Politicians shouldn't try to do one-liners. They should try to be humorous. There's a big difference between trying to do stand-up comedy and just being a little bit humorous in what you say. You know?
It's funny. A friend of mine, Mario DeRay, is an attorney, and I was trying to file I was trying to bring an order to show cause without an attorney, and I filed all the paperwork wrong, and it was going to be laughed out of court. And he said, "This is why you need a lawyer. This is why I'm not up at 3 a.m. trying to produce radio shows, right. And you shouldn't be trying to practice law."
To do your own. It's like doing your own teeth for a dentist, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought that was a point well taken. At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. Jeffrey Gurian is my guest. You take your headphones off now because now we got the volume from the headphones kind of bleeding into the microphone there.
Great.
But and actually we could actually lower the volume again because there you go, much better. Now, in terms of comedy, one of the golden eras that people always talk about with respect to comedy is the era of the Catskills. There's been a whole resurgence of interest in the Catskills these days and Borscht Belt comedy because of the show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, a show which I absolutely loved.
Yes.
And you're going to be actually performing at the Borscht Belt Festival in Ellenville, New York.
This weekend. It's the second annual one. I was at last year. I say I'm involved in this documentary on Grossingers. Bobby Friedman, the head of Bungalow Entertainment, who's a very well-established producer of film and TV, is doing a documentary on Grossingers. And it's one of the hotels. For people who don't know, the Borscht Belt was popular, I guess, in the 40s and 50s when it started. Jewish people were restricted from going to hotels in those days, the major hotels. So they built their own. That's what we do. You know, if we can't get in, if we can't get in, we build our own. And they built the most exclusive.
Same thing with Israel. There was no country. You built your own.
You build your own, right? And they were amazing hotels. Grossingers had its own airstrip. They would fly in the big stars. They had the biggest swimming pool you've ever seen. They had a ski lift. They had things that other hotels didn't have. But there was the Concord and the Nevele Hotel. Nevele, by the way, is 11 spelled backwards. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
It was founded by 11 school teachers that were on a hike And the people who wound up buying the land and developing it into a hotel named it the Neverly because of that. So there was a million of those hotels. You get 3 meals a day, all you could eat. You could order everything on the menu for the same price, and people did. Malzy Lawrence said they used to have to take people out with a forklift after they would eat because people would gain weight just from being there for a few days. So the entertainment was amazing. Because in those days, there were no comedy clubs, It wasn't until 1963 when Bud Friedman opened the Improv. That was the world's first comedy club, a club dedicated to just comedy.
You're kidding.
Before that, there were no comedy clubs. Comics had to perform in nightclubs or coffee shops in the village. So the hotels in the Catskills would bring in all the talent. And in those days, Henny Youngman and Burl and Joey Adams and all the comedians, Jackie Mason, of course. And so the Borscht Belt, there's now a Borscht Belt Museum. And I was there as a little kid. I used to sing in a choir, a professional choir. I was a soloist in a professional Hebrew choir. We sang at Carnegie Hall and Madison Square Garden. And as a little kid for the high holidays in the Jewish tradition, there are, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are considered the high holidays. We would sing at the different hotels, and I got to meet Jenny Grossinger. I was a favorite of hers.
Great.
I was a cute 10-year-old kid. From the time I was 10 to 13, I sang. And so she would always come out and greet me. So they just interviewed me for this documentary. And then as an adult, I was there as a comedy writer because that's where I got to meet a lot of the big stars.
So if people want to see you this weekend, how can they do so?
You can go to the website, the Borscht Belt Comedy Festival. Borscht is spelled Borscht. Borscht Belt Comedy Festival in Ellenville, New York. I'll be performing in a show called the Borscht Belt Classics on Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m., right in the heart of Ellenville. And there's going to be a lot of fun. There'll be shows all weekend, all day and evening as well.
Now we see why you're
a great time.
Now we see why your theme song is Jump Around.
Yeah.
If you're just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. You're listening to The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Jeffrey Gurian. 646-720-0635 is our phone number. Igor in New Jersey had a question of. I was actually going to ask you this very same thing. We're going to try to experiment with the headphones again, sure. Igor. Bear with us a second because we're going. Sure. Jeffrey's working on getting these headphones over this mammoth hair that
I got it.
All right. Go ahead.
All right. Very good.
I got to turn the volume
Jeffrey,
up again. Okay.
Yes, you're my favorite guest he ever has on. I always enjoy when you come on.
Thank you.
I saw your picture that Frank had taken of you as well as, there at Tony Lobianco's memorial. And I was wondering if you could tell us how you came to know him and what he meant to you.
Sure. That's a great question. Tony was a very special guy. I was thinking about it. I think we first met at Columbus Cafe. Columbus Cafe was an amazing place that there'll never be one like it again. It was kind of like Spago in LA. It was on 69th Street and Columbus Avenue. And all the biggest stars would come in. Danny Aiello and Paul Sorvino and Mike Tyson would be there. Who else was there? Let me see. It was owned by two brothers, Paulie and Charlie Herman, and I'm pretty sure that's where I met Tony in those days. But one of the memorable times was when John Katzimatidis produced the play A Little Flower, or The Little Flower, about Fiorello LaGuardia. And Tony Lobianco wrote and directed that play. And I wound up driving him and his wife home that night.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. He was a great guy. He always played like a gangster or a cop or something like that. But in person, he was a very humble man.
As nice as it can be. And I think that was reflected in a lot of the eulogies. But, I actually saw him as LaGuardia he played LaGuardia in 3 different stage productions. And I saw him in 2. I saw him in that production of The Little Flower when John Katzimatidis,
it was
our
on
boss.
East 76th Street, I think, in like
they
a
were
church
all over
or
the
something.
city.
Oh, yeah.
They did it all over the city. I think 13 different performances. And the other production that I saw him in was Fiorello, and there was one other stage production which I missed him in.
But he actually wrote it.
Oh no,
he
he's
wrote
incredible.
it and directed it. Yeah.
Incredible as LaGuardia. A very good question, Igor. Thank you. But he was a great guy and certainly a terrific actor. Nobody like him at all.
And it was so nice to see so many people show up to pay their respects. And I got to see you in a suit. You look great.
Yeah, you didn't recognize me. I was
this guy looks
my
so much
version.
like Frank Morano.
Is my version of camouflage.
He's got a twin. I was like, and Joe Piscopo. That was, how long I know Joe? I know Joe before he started working out. Really, I have pictures with him.
It's funny that you mentioned Joe Piscopo, because that leads me to another thing that I wanted to ask you about. Do you watch? Remind me, are you a Star Trek fan or not?
Not really.
Not really. Okay.
No.
So Joe is in one episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's the first season or the second season, but the premise of the show, and for your benefit or for anyone that hasn't seen Star Trek: The Next Generation, is there's an android on the show who is an artificial life form. And essentially, he is trying to learn about humanity, and he wants to be more human, and he wants to learn how to be funny. And Joe is a hologram of a 20th century comic.
Okay.
And so Data, this android, steps onto the holodeck, and he has some questions for Joe Piscopo about exactly how to be funny. This is from The Outrageous Acona, Brent Spiner as Data and Joe Piscopo as the comic.
I wish to know what is funny.
It's funny, I don't know. It's a matter of opinion, I guess. Tip O'Neill in a dress. Some people say words that end with a K are funny. A briefcase that looks like a fish. Personally, I find that hysterical.
Tip O'Neill. Accessing. 20th century male, politician, overweight, wearing female clothing, carrying a valise that looks like a fish. So, the juxtaposition of gender and an amphibian briefcase is funny.
Well, I think whatever makes you laugh is funny.
Jeff, I'm going to ask you the same question Data asked Joe Piscopo. How do you know what's funny? Oh, and also now I think I see the problem is you're using headphones that aren't plugged in.
Oh,
I think
really?
that is the
that's
issue.
Ridiculous.
No wonder you couldn't hear anything. So
yeah, look at that.
Yeah, there you go. So if
How
you want,
crazy is that? Where does it go?
Well, where those are plugged in over there, where it says headphones. Yeah, but now you have to take that little adapter off there. There you go. Just, there you go. Well, it happens. It's the best help we can afford. There you go. Much better.
It was so loud, it almost blew my ears.
There you go.
Wow.
Well, all right. Then now we don't hear that. Feeling. So same
so
question.
Nobody heard that.
No. The headphones only help you hear. The microphone helps everybody else hear.
I'm new in this country.
I know.
Sorry.
It's okay. So in terms of how you would answer Brent Spiner's question, how do you know what's funny?
Comedy is so subjective. It's funny that he used the example of a fish. I once did a film called Men Who Take a Fish to Work. And I found these huge fish. I came home one night. They were in my garage. They must have come from a restaurant. They're huge, like plastic fish. And I kept them because I knew that one day I would use them. And I got people to be in this film. Men who take a fish to hot clubs. Men who take a fish wherever they go. It was a whole thing that I did. It's really funny to walk through the street holding a huge fish. To me, it's very funny. And that's what's funny about comedy. It's very subjective. What's funny to me, you may hate, which is why not everybody likes the same comedian.
No doubt about it.
Yeah,
but
everybody says, "Oh, this guy's so funny," and it's funny too because people say, "You should see my friend; he's so funny." But then you meet the guy.
And they say, "How funny is he?"
Well, there's a big difference between being funny with your friends and being funny on stage in front of strangers. Most of the people who are funny with their friends are doing inside material that their friends are familiar with. But to get up on stage and try to convince strangers, total strangers, that what you think is funny is actually funny is one of the hardest things in the world. Probably not as hard as brain surgery, but it's very hard to do, is to get up on stage and perform comedy. So what's funny? It depends on what's funny to you. Some jokes always work.
So, for instance, whenever there's a lot of people that are into online dating now, right? And even prior to the era of online dating, one of the key things that men and women, but I think more so women, always list as something that they're looking for in a mate is sense of humor. But we see that you mentioned politicians. They want to use humor to connect with the voters. We see this in the workplace. People want to work for a boss with a sense of humor. Bosses want to hire people that have a sense of humor.
Not a sense of smell, a sense of humor, right? The other senses don't count. Just the sense of humor is the one they look for, right?
But so if you were to give advice to people that might not be naturally funny as to how they can develop a sense of humor or at least tap into their inner funny bone, what would you tell them?
I think it has to come naturally.
Because J.D.
Frank.
Vance is listening right now.
Well, listen, I do comedy coaching. There are people who do comedy classes, but the people who sign up have to already know that they're funny. They have to believe that they're funny. You can make a person funnier. You can tell them how to structure a joke, but there are some people that literally have no sense of humor. And those people, you can't make them. Not everyone in the world could be funny, you know? Meanwhile, women always say they like a guy with a sense of humor, but it's the singers that get all the girls, you know? You don't see a lot of comedy groupies. You don't see, because a lot of comedians were, how could I say, socially challenged. They were not always like the hippest people in high school. So it's usually the musicians that have all the groupies, even though women say they like somebody with a sense of humor. It does help, though. Women are very clever, by the way. I find that a lot, that women are they're almost funnier than guys in conversation. They come back and forth with very interesting quips.
Absolutely. No, the intellect of women is astounding, and I hear they may soon be given the right to vote, which I certainly think is a good thing. You actually, you talk a lot about healing, not only when it comes to dentistry and emotional healing. You've written books about it, but you were actually given a weekend at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies. That's where Deepak Chopra speaks and kind of made a name for himself. Well, what are you doing over there?
It's a big honor. It's another thing. There's this thing. It says when you find your true path, the universe supports you in that. And these things are starting to come to me, which is really interesting because I enjoy public speaking. My goal is always to put out positive energy to the universe. So the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, is giving me a weekend from September 20th to the 22nd based on the success of my book, Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness, which is really about letting go of the pains of the past. All of us are harboring hurtful things that have happened to us since we're children, and they affect our thoughts. They give us thoughts that are not valid for us. Negative thoughts about ourselves, the kind of thoughts that tell you that you can never be successful, that you're not enough, that you're not this enough or that enough. And they're not true, Frank. They're not valid. They come from our subconscious mind. And so, one of the things I work with stutterers also, because I used to stutter very badly. And I always like to bring that up. It's about making that voice so small. If you were in a crowd and someone was whispering to you, there's a good chance you wouldn't hear what they were saying. You have to work on your mind to make your subconscious voice so low that you can ignore it. So my book is about releasing the heart wounds. I call them heart wounds. Every time someone ever hurt your feelings or breaks a promise to you or breaks up with you in a relationship or fires you from a job or bullied you as a child, on some level we keep those things inside of us. The traumatic events in our lives are more deeply ingrained than the happy events. And because they affect your thoughts, you make bad decisions. Every time you have to make a decision in your life, you think about what to do. And if your thoughts are faulty, your decisions are not going to work out for you, which is why you find these patterns, the same bad job over and over again, the same bad relationship. So I'm going to be speaking about, the title they gave me is called Healing Your Heart with Humor, because all healing comes from the heart. So when I lectured to the dentist, I said, you have to connect your hands to your heart. When you're working on patients, every patient that comes in, you treat them like they're a guest in your home. It's an honor for someone to trust you with their health. And I'll be talking about how to release these old memories and replace them with good memories so that you can get rid of the thoughts that are not valid for you. It's how I cured myself of stuttering. I had to let go of thoughts that told me that I wasn't enough. Something made me think that I needed a disability, and it's a false disability. If a man has a limp, he limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. But when I was stuttering, I could speak fine when I was by myself. I only studied when I was trying to talk to somebody else.
You know, it's such an interesting point. And not that it's the same thing as what you're saying, but I'm reading this book now by Dr. Marilyn Wedge, who I just had on this program recently, called A Disease Called Childhood. And it's all about ADHD, right?
Yeah, I have it so bad.
And basically, one of the observations that she makes is there are so many regional differences in ADHD diagnosis. And why should that be? Why should children in the Northeast be diagnosed with more ADHD than children in the Midwest? And that's where she believes that there's a lot of subjectivity into whether you are diagnosed that way or not. But she uses that same example. Well, if there's the same number of people with XYZ disease throughout the country, basically. And, and obviously there are exceptions.
I was diagnosed by a neurologist. It's very trendy these days for everybody to say, I have ADHD, because they're confused. Everybody's confused. But my youngest daughter was diagnosed with it, and I decided I wanted to be tested. And I went to a neurologist, and he said to me, my ADHD is so bad. He said, I must have had to work 10 times as hard as everyone else to get through school. And I tell that story too, because I did. I had to work very, very hard. I face a lot of confusion. And I had this article with me because I recently, coincidentally, I wound up doing 2 podcasts on ADHD. And it says 1 in 9 U.S. kids have ADHD. And a lot of times medication doesn't work. I've tried many medications.
Right.
Nothing worked on me.
Right.
All it did was it took away my personality. I didn't feel well from taking it. So I deal with it. I have to learn how my mind works or doesn't work. And I face a lot of confusion, and it causes me a lot of fear, which is why I wrote the book, Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. You know how hard it was for me to travel to Minneapolis?
Oh, I'm sure.
It's the reason I went to Japan alone in 2019. I challenge myself constantly to do everything that makes me uncomfortable. When I was in the airport, it's filled with millions of people. They're all traveling. If they can do it, I have to be able to do it too. That's what I tell myself.
I love that attitude. And if you want to check out Jeffrey Gurian's book, Fight the Fear, you can just go to Amazon, type in his last name, Gurian, Gurian. By the way, while you're spelling Gurian, if you have not already seen the short documentary, Who the F is Jeffrey Gurian, check it out on the YouTube. It's absolutely terrific. But unfortunately, because all of the big news channels have been dominated by would-be assassination attempts and new directors of the Secret Service and new running mates and new this and new that, there are a whole bunch of stories that have been ignored by the mainstream press. Jeffrey Gurian has compiled several of them that he is going to share with you. You're not going to hear these news stories anywhere else. Perhaps there's a reason for that. We'll get into them straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is Motley Crue singing Kickstart My Heart. This is a birthday bumper music selection from an old radio colleague of mine by the name of Diana Ferrito. Some of you may remember Diana. She was a regular on the Scott and Todd morning show on WPLJ in New York, but she has worked at all sorts of radio stations all over the country, all over the region, and she was a terrific radio professional. And we at the radio station I was working at, we shared a floor with WPLJ at the time, so I'd see Diana every day. And Diana was a very attractive woman, and it was a wonderful way to start your day, seeing Diana on a regular basis. Haven't seen her in years, but I'm sure she's still very attractive. Now she's working in education, and she's listening to us in Saratoga, New York. So happy birthday, Diana. Hopefully it is a fun one. Now you can't have the word funny without fun, and that is where Dr. Jeffrey Gurian comes in. He's a comedy writer, stand-up comic, a host, an author, and more. You can learn more about him at comedymatterstv.com. Jimmy in Staten Island has a question for you, Jeffrey. Hello there, Jimmy.
Hello,
hey, Jimmy.
Big Frank. Hi, Mr. Gurian.
Headphones again, right?
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Okay.
Could you hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Jimmy.
All right. Listen, hi, Frank. Hi, Mr. Gurian. I'm a big fan. I love you. I think you're wonderful.
Thank you.
I need to ask you a question, please. I'll be quick. I'm 61 years old now. About 30 years ago, I performed at Pips on Emmons Avenue, and I went over quite well. I did a lot of accents. I did a marriage, Italian jokes, so on and so forth, but not jokes as, Mary had whatever. No, just like from a personal experience. So I need to know, is there any way, or is it too late for me, especially based on this PC world, to get back into comedy? Because it really is something. People always said, oh, you're a natural. Oh, you should have been on TV. Oh, you should. Well, here I am in the kitchen making coffee at 3 o'clock in the morning. Is there anything you could help me with? Can I go to one of your classes?
It's never too late. You can write to me. I never mind giving out my email, jeffrey@jeffreygurian.com. You can write to me, and if I have a class to suggest to you, I'll let you know, or I could do private coaching for you. But it's never too late.
jeffreygurian.com.
Yep, it's never too late to do comedy. 61 is not too old.
61 is not even that old.
A lot of the greats
Jimmy.
performed into their 90s.
Well, I want to try to get to 64 and get my comedy going. But let me tell you, you are well loved by this house right here. I live alone, and I love you. I think you're great. And my Frankie over there, he's also the best. And God bless you, and have a great, great night.
Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate it. Very kind. All right. Now, there are a lot of stories that have been missed for whatever reason. Could be media bias, could be a variety of other factors by the mainstream media. And Jeffrey Gurian has spent a long time compiling some of these news stories that are only found on the Gurian News Network. They're all in the book, Man Robs Bank with His Chin, and Other Stories Missed by the Mainstream Media. Give us a few, Jeff, that people may have missed.
Certainly. George Washington wore wooden pants. A lot of people think he had wooden teeth. Truth is, he wore wooden pants, grew up very poor. As a child, his father made his diapers out of bark.
Oh.
And you know that famous picture of him crossing the Delaware?
Sure, yeah.
That's why he was standing up in the boat, Frank. You can't sit down in wooden pants.
You're kidding. I had no idea.
Well, these stories, they're missed by mainstream media.
I knew that he didn't really have wooden teeth, that he had cow's teeth or hippopotamus teeth, and they're still in museums to this day.
But the wooden pants you didn't know about,
I had no idea.
And he was a heavy drinker, and that's why he never fell down, because the wooden pants kept him up.
I'll have to try that.
Yeah.
My next drinking excursion.
Hunter lost in wilderness, saved by his mustache.
His
mustache became magnified from the cold, and it started to spin like a propeller. It was magnetized, and it pointed him out of the woods. And his wife said, I always hated that mustache. Who thought it would save his life?
That's crazy. Was it one of those kind of Raleigh fingers types?
Yeah, it was like a handlebar mustache, like the kind I had to wear in dental school. When they banned me for having a mustache, they said you can only come back if you wear it above your lip. And I had to get mustache wax like a lunatic. I looked like Salvador Dali going to dental school with a tie and a mustache up in the air.
Could have saved your life. Wow.
Man displays uncanny ability to lift heavy objects with his eye. You know how hard that is to have a muscular eye?
I didn't even know that was possible.
He started lifting pennies off a counter with his eye. The last thing, he lifted a table with his eye, which is unbelievable.
A table?
A table with his eye.
Oh, boy. Give us one more, because we're almost out of time.
Let me see. High roller wears mustache out of gold. He had been known for, he would go into the casino. His mustache was so highly polished that it blinded a couple of the dealers, and they're actually suing him. He started out wearing like a diamond encrusted beard, but then he had a gold mustache that he would polish. and they felt it wasn't fair. He was blinding the other players.
As a craps player, an occasional baccarat player myself, I can appreciate that. I wouldn't want somebody with one of those crazy
with a
mustaches.
Golden mustache. So this is an entire book. Man robs bank with his chin, and I have blurbs on it from Richard Lewis, the late Richard Lewis, who we just lost recently from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Nick Kroll, who wrote, Jeffrey Gurian asked me to write a blurb for his book, and this is it.
Well done.
And Colin Jost, the head writer from SNL.
People can check it out on Amazon.
If you like strange stories.
And you can see a whole world of Jeffrey Gurian activity at ComedyMattersTV.com. Jeffrey, it is always a treat. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. It's always an honor, literally, truly an honor to be on with you.
ComedyMattersTV.com. The rest of you, keep asking questions.